As time goes on, I long for simpler days. Days where I could spend hours on my good old Nintendo DS, playing Pokemon Black and White, Hotel Dusk, and one of my favorite series, Ace Attorney. I think this is a normal part of growing up, wishing that you could go back in time and relive aspects of your life that you cherished and took for granted. I sound like an old fossil now, don't I? Funnily enough, going back in time is actually key for what I'm talking about today. Ghosttrick Phantom Detective is today's game, my friends. Initially released on the Nintendo DS back in 2011, it's a game that I hold kinda close to my heart. And not just because the game was created by Shu Takumi, the same mind of Ace Attorney fame, although I'd be lying if I wasn't interested in the guy's new take when it comes to mystery stories. There's just something fascinating about revisiting an older story, especially when it's based around detective and logical thought. And the supernatural doesn't hurt either. And to me, it's probably one of gaming's greatest unsung games. It took 10 years for the game to get an HD remaster, and that's what we're going to be using for the footage today. Yeah, because hot damn, look at that animation! I will say that this video will be split into multiple sections, where we talk about the game in various spoiler levels. I will say that going into the game blind is the best way to go about it, so if you're interested in the game, you can pick it up on any major gaming outlets: Switch, PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. Trust me, this is a game you want to get, and watching this video will spoil your first playthrough. This is your last chance before we dive into the game itself. And if you're still here, well, I'm MangaKamen, and welcome to Ghosttrick. Most people, when they hear the name Shu Takumi, often think of the very iconic Ace Attorney games, and why not? These games are probably the greatest visual novel mystery games of all time. They spun tons of fan works, games, memes, video spoofs, and of course a franchise that spans well over 10 games, including the spin-offs. After the Trials and Tribulations game came out, Takumi was looking to make a different kind of mystery game. He happens to be a huge fan of mystery novels, and while Ace Attorney certainly did fill that niche, eventually you want to try something different. Then again, Takumi himself was a bit of a different in and of himself. He actually performed a magic trick to get his job at Capcom. I actually showed one of my magic tricks during the job interview at Capcom. I had my props with me and performed in front of an interviewer who loved it. But then they wanted to know how I did it, and while revealing a magic trick is a grave sin, I revealed just a bit of it because I wanted a job. But I'd like to believe that wasn't the only reason I got hired. You know, this explains a lot why there are so many magicians in the Ace Attorney games, and this is extremely charming, and I can see how the games got their comedy. Then again, he was also the voice for Phoenix Wright in the original games too, in the original Japanese, so... Initially, Takumi wanted to be a writer and loved mysteries even in his school days. However, he really didn't have the courage to go through publishers. But I was introduced to games, and the time that I entered the industry, there weren't that many good mystery games. I realized that it might be a good medium to convey a mystery story. While I don't necessarily agree with the idea that there weren't any good mystery games at the time, I will agree that video games are an excellent medium to convey a mystery story. A good whodunit can be an intriguing experience, especially if you're trying to figure out all the clues along with the protagonist in a race to figure out what the root cause is for the mystery. Whether it be a murder, a theft, or figuring out who stole the last slice of cheesecake in the refrigerator. Frank.
You little bitch!
However, when you yourself are the one solving the mystery, as if you yourself are the detective, I feel that can allow a lot more of an enthralling experience. And unlike passive media such as books or films, video games offer that level of immersion and can suck people in a lot easier. After all, you see this corpse with his ass sticking up in the air? That's your corpse. You're the one who died. Doesn't that suck? Just look at your hair! Back to Takumi. When he was beginning to work on Ghosttrick, initially it was a very different concept and would take place in a singular location, an apartment building. Kinda reminds me of Hotel Dusk and its sequel Last Window, another pair of good mystery games on the DS. The initial concept I had for the game was a story that involved a crowd of characters, a game in which you would observe mysterious characters from the outside and discover their secrets as you played. Because of that, my first draft of the idea was that the game would be set in an apartment building. You would observe the people that lived there and discover what mysteries they harbored. I asked myself what kind of main character would be able to observe in such a manner and arrived at the concept of a spirit. Hand to God for this next one, but part of the reason why it took me so long to get this script started was because I was searching for a quote from Takumi where he was asked if he was into the occult, and his response would be, "Oh, I hope people don't think that. I'm actually scared of ghosts." But for the life of me, I couldn't find it. Takumi wanted to create a mystery game that was completely separate from the Ace Attorney series, because while I do appreciate the Ace Attorney, it does have its eccentricities that would conflict with this idea, like creating holographic technology in the 19th century England.
Technology!
I can recall when the fourth Ace Attorney game came out, the one with Apollo Justice's debut, a lot of people felt like there was something missing from the game. However, during that time frame, it wasn't just ghosttrick that Takumi had on his plate. Hell, he actually had shifted his priorities back to Ace Attorney during this time. There were going to be DS ports, creating the 5th episode for Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney's first game, and he was still supervising Apollo Justice's development and wrote the game scenario. Granted, it was reported at the time that Takumi said he wanted to end the Ace Attorney series at 3, and that it shouldn't become a shadow of its former self. I felt that Phoenix's story had been told, and that the series should not continue. Knowing when to end a story is very important, and I wanted to avoid dragging it out and having it become a shadow of its former self. Well, I'll be the first to admit that Apollo games aren't exactly great, but I'll be damned if I'm not grateful for the Ace Attorney games. Oh, Von Zykes, you can throw one at me any day of the week. When ghosttrick was proposed, it was actually known as Ghost Spy, and you had to observe between multiple tenants of the apartment building as a spirit. Of course, when you're giving a single night in the story, it'd be hard to follow the characters you're learning about if you were alive, and hence why a ghost was chosen for the main characters, since it would be easier to observe the cast and spy on them. Granted, eventually the spy concept was dropped, in favor of a different idea. What was that idea, you may ask? Well, I think we should save that for the next section, but don't worry, this won't be the last time we hear from Mr. Takumi. There's a lot more to look into for various aspects of the game that we can get insight from the creator himself. But I think we spent enough time talking about the preamble. I think it's time we dim the lights, start the music, and let's begin.
Be afraid of the spoiler side. You should be.
We begin in darkness, our thoughts appearing on the screen before us. We awake to an odd woman, a man with a gun, and a dead body, a man in red. We quickly learn that the dead in red must be us. After all, it's clear we're not the woman or the man with the gun. Oh well, not like we can do anything about it. We're already dead. What can we do?
This is no time to be lolling around dead! You're the only one who can save her!
We hear a voice. The world turns red, and we're met with some odd imagery. We're beckoned to save the girl by that voice again and again. But what can we do? We're dead. But that's exactly how we can save her. So by moving our soul into the core of a crossing gate, this is a ghost trick. Even after death, we have the ability to manipulate objects, the powers of the dead. Unfortunately, while we may be able to save the woman from her immediate fate, she didn't get far enough to get away. The gunman still has a shotgun aimed right at her, so we gotta find another object's core to move into and manipulate. That wrecking ball might be a good option, but unfortunately we can't reach it. Seems like we have limitations to our powers, so I guess we'll just have to use the guitar and...
That's gotta be some of the slowest running away I've ever seen.
Even though the core we're possessing, the guitar, was shot, we're still in it. But unfortunately, the only core that's nearby is our own corpse. I mean, technically speaking, a dead body is no longer a person, it is an object, so it should be possible to possess a dead body. Right? Unfortunately, nothing happens, because corpses, while not living anymore, aren't exactly ordinary things. And unfortunately with that, the woman is killed. Now, some of you may be wondering why I decided to go the extra detail with this opening section of the game. It's because I wanted to highlight how ghosttrick handles its tutorial, because not only is it snappy and concise, but it's actively entangled into the story in and of itself. A lot of games, especially when it comes to tutorials and explaining themselves, fall into one of two camps. They either expect you already know how to play games, or in which case they speed you on through and you're expected to learn along the way afterwards, or they hold your hand so much that it begins to get annoying. Yes, Nomona, I know how to throw a Pokeball. However, ghosttrick manages to not feel like both. Even though it is explaining its mechanics, this is partially due to the fact that mechanically speaking, Ghost Trick is a simple game. Most items you possess either act as a pathway to other cores, or they can only be doing one thing at a time. The other factor is that we're actively trying to save someone, therefore we're being thrust into the narrative of the story pretty quickly. For me, when I started playing the game, it took about 3 minutes to get through that section. I'm not counting the setup, but when I have an actual control of the dead guy. Toss in this music, I was sucked into the narrative immediately, and the game had already drawn my attention with its gameplay, its music, its narrative, and obviously the artistic design choices. And to top it off, we failed to save the girl.
In the end, it looks like her fate remains unchanged. So what good are these ghost tricks of mine? But just as I was thinking this,
Hello there. How are you feeling? Not very well, I imagine. A terrible tragedy would happen tonight.
This desk lamp was the voice we heard earlier, the one pleading for us to save the woman. Well, voice is a bit of a misnomer. The dead don't have voices. They share thoughts. Ray here is teaching us more and more about our ghost tricks, and says there's a chance to save the young woman. How, you may ask? Well, there's something different about corpses. While we couldn't do anything with our own corpse, when we possess a different corpse, we unlock the true powers of the dead. When you possess the core of a dead body, we enter into a weird area, a vortex with a soul wandering about. But this is just the intermediate area. Rather, we can go back in time. "4 minutes before a person's death. It can only be done with corpses that are fresh though, less than a day. But luckily for us, the woman's death just happened so we can save her. And so we go back in time. When you do go back, we're treated to a small film-like production, showing the 4 minutes of what happened to the victim. These help the player understand the events of what's going to happen and see what they can do in order to prevent the death. And even if you fail, you can still go back as many times as you want, so failure isn't exactly an option here. Here's where I can really talk about the gameplay of Ghost Trick. At the heart of the game is a puzzle, where your goal is to prevent the death of a character you're trying to save. The puzzles are to find a path that can save their life. And you're on an actual time limit, so you do have to hurry at times. And it's not even just that. Sometimes you'll have to experiment with what the items do in order to find a path. Using this puzzle as an example, you have to open the fridge door, which would allow a blender to fall out of it, and using a fan to push a nearby flagpole's rope up into the blender. You can then use the blender to pull the rope and allow you to ride the flag up to the level. I won't be going into so much detail for most of the puzzles of this game, but I wanted to show that you do need to experiment and test out what the game has to offer in order to solve the puzzles. Sometimes a path will appear if you experiment, and you can't always assume that there's no path. There always is one. Whether it be experimenting with everything in the world you can get your soul on, or waiting for time to pass, there's always going to be a path to save the victim, with you becoming a murderer in the process. It's okay, folks, we're using cartoon logic here. Jigo just got flattened and... Son of a bitch! But regardless of a lamp turning me into a criminal now, we've successfully saved the woman. But we're still dead. Could this get any worse?
After all, there's only one path left to the dead. And that is to disappear.
disappear?
When the sun rises in the morning, I'm afraid you're going to cease to exist.
In the morning? I'm going to cease to exist. Apparently there's nothing I can do to change that, but just the same, I still want to know. I want to know my story. The lost story of my fate, right up until the time of my death. And until I learn that...
You won't be able to rest in peace, right?
We're now tasked to solve our own murder. After all, who killed us and why? Who are we? What were we doing? We only have until morning to figure this out, and we've only got one clue: the mysterious woman whom we just saved. After all, she was a witness to our murder, as we learned when we went back in time. I want to say that I love this opening level. Not only does it show off the remaster's technical upgrades that made the animations a lot more fluid, but this does what a great opening should be for a video game. Gives a basic rundown for what the players can do, it sets up the stakes of the mystery, and we've only got one night to learn about what caused our death, because at the break of dawn, we're going to disappear. Like I said before, I'm not going to go into each puzzle going forward when talking about this game, since half the fun of ghosttrick is figuring out the puzzles themselves, and they're not too difficult. After all, Takumi was more interested in players enjoying a story. I can see why he wanted to be a writer. Well, Mr. Takumi, I have to say I think you succeeded in that regard. Alright, this is going to be the second spoiler warning I'm giving you guys. If this game looks good to you, then I'm imploring you to stop watching this video now, because from here on I'm going to spoil more of the game. I'll give one more spoiler for endgame stuff, but that won't be for a while. And how long is this video going to be? Yeah, I think you'll be fine. With the nearsighted assassin taken care of, we begin our investigation, possessing an umbrella so that we can have the woman carry us and keep her out of the rain. I mean, what kind of gentleman wouldn't want to do that? I wouldn't! You monster!
What in the world just happened? The crane moved all by itself, and then that big iron bowl fell all by itself. It started raining all by itself, and then an umbrella came down all by itself. Oh my goodness, don't tell me I have psychokinetic powers.
Some of the writing in this game is very adorable.
If anything happened to him, I would kill everyone in this room and then myself.
I think while we're seeing this unfold, I want to take some time to talk about the character art design for the game. One thing you'll notice immediately is the characters stand out from all the backgrounds, especially with the use of bright colors. There's a whole lot of details in the background, so when you see the character models on screen, their bright colors and simple designs really stand out. And when we see the character portraits, they just pop. They're done in a different style from the rest of the game, which again helps draw your attention to them. And most of the characters in the entire story get one of these portraits. Granted, most of the characters only get one or two poses, but the main cast gets a fair bit of them. They have bold lines and shading, and the white outline also helps with the characters to stand out from the images in the background. One thing you'll notice is that the entire game is given a side view. It almost looks like a stage show, or that we're watching a movie, or in this case, reading a book. But as you'll soon find out, even this is used by ghosttrick to great effect. The woman pulls out a note from our dead body's pocket, but before we can read it, a phone call comes from the local payphone. Before he traveled back in time, the nearsighted Jigo was the one who picked up this phone and said the job was done. Whoever was on the line was probably the person who ordered us dead. Luckily, when you possess a telephone whenever it's in use, you can see the conversation between both ends of the line, even seeing both people talking. And even more luckily, our ghost has another ability. He can travel over phone lines if he knows the number of a destination, which is automatically recorded somewhere when you listen to a conversation, so you don't need to remember numbers. So, we now have a mysterious blue man to visit.
But I had to come, to ask for your help.
My help?
Many mysterious things will happen in this town tonight. I'm trusting in you to get to the bottom of them and find out the truth. You're the only one who can do it. I want you to use your powers of the dead to find this truth.
I'm grateful to you for everything you've done, but I can't promise I'll help. Tomorrow morning, I cease to exist. That doesn't give me a whole lot of time. I need to pursue my own mystery, find out the truth about myself.
That's more than enough.
Huh?
If you succeed in doing that, you'll have done what I asked anyway. The two are one and the same.
One and the same.
And with that, we travel the phone lines to figure out our death. And from here on, I'm not going to be as detailed with the story since that's the main draw of the game. But in that regard, I do want to point out there are some spoilers in gameplay that I use here. That being said, when we get to the odd room with two weird blue men, we learn a few interesting tidbits about the characters we've met so far. The red-haired girl is Lynn, and we, the man in red, are named Cecil. However, when we try reading some files, we realize we can't read it. It's in a foreign language, but before we can do anything else, the man who supposedly ordered our hit gets another phone call.
This is One Step Ahead Tango. I'm at the target's apartment now.
And out with it, man. Have you taken care of her?
Nah, she ain't back yet.
What?
It only stands to reason. If the target got here first, they wouldn't call me one step ahead, now would they?
I don't get it, but in any case, man, once you've taken care of...
Then you'll promote me to head of the Hitman division?
No, man. Now you're even getting one step ahead of me.
We can discuss my new salary later.
Great Scott! Now you're even getting one step ahead of your last one step ahead.
I'll get back to my job now, sir.
Oh, confound it! You're even hanging up one step ahead.
This exchange right here is where I want to highlight some of the more comical aspects of Ghosttrick's writing. While the exchange wasn't exactly a knee slapper, it was still an entertaining and comical romp. Now, this kind of comedy is the kind that makes you chuckle. It's not exactly looking to make you burst out a gut, which I think works well with Ghosttrick. While this game isn't fully a serious one, despite the murdering happening, it interplaces between serious moments with small comedic bits that can break the tension. After all, if you have such a colorful world and cast of characters, you get quite the tonal whiplash. So whether with the innocent lines of dialogue like before, or freaking people out with sizzles, ghost tricks, and seeing their reaction is enough to put a smile on my face. What doesn't is seeing a cute little doggy get shot. Well, can't let that happen. The only way to stop his death is to ruin some headphones. Guess I can say goodbye to Raycon ever sponsoring this channel. This is Missile, the dog of Lin, who is actually based upon Takumi's actual dog of the same name. One thing to know about the ghost world is that the dead don't have a voice. Rather, we essentially are seeing the thoughts of those who are dead. But once we save the dog, and in turn the little lady Camila, we learned something interesting, that the living can have a core. Turns out if you save someone and they're awake during the process, they retain their memories of their death and being revived. It's how we're able to talk to this cute little doggy again. Possessing the phone, we spy on a conversation between Lin and Camila, and with us learning that the two are going to meet at a place called the Chicken Kitchen, with Camila being asked to find a music box, before the phone gets dropped into the fish tank along with the Raycon headphones. Ugh. So long, Verizon sponsorship. After trying to get back to a working phone, we find ourselves back at the junkyard, with a couple of detectives in a corner examining our body, with the lead detective, Cabanella, arriving. And here's where I need to ask you guys to stop what you're doing and watch the screen. It's at this point I want to talk about the animation of Ghosttrick, which if you watch the screen, you notice how fluid it is. It's easy to attribute this to the remaster's graphics. However, back in the day when this game came out in 2011, the animations were still really well done. And here's the thing about the animation. This was all hand-drawn and then translated into 2D cel-shaded pixel art. In terms of how we made the motions, we did not use any motion capturing whatsoever. So the mother actually went in there and made everything from scratch with polygons and from the ground up. We were able to put a lot into those little nuances, a lot like those little details because we were in full control of the actual motions and animations of the characters. In the remaster, we managed to get a really good look at the basis for the animations, as well as additional content added to the game. As someone who's interested in animation, games, and of course good artwork, I always find it fascinating to see the basis for animations. Here's the thing about Ghosttrick's initial release. It was on the Nintendo DS, and thanks to the technical limitations at the time, the Ghosttrick team had issues with 3D models rendering on the hardware. But thanks to the lead programmer, Toshihiko Honda, they managed to make this limitation into a strength by using a popular technique that was used by games such as... I'm talking about pre-rendered techniques. These were used to rasterize the game's animations and would allow the game to run a lot smoother, which not only preserved the quality of the animations, but also took a load off the system. And why wouldn't these guys want to preserve the animation of these characters? Look at this one of Cabanella's entrance movement. This animation was one of the team's favorite animations, and it took a month to finish. Nowadays, animation like this can be easily gone through motion capture, which, funnily enough, Takumi himself was against using for this game. One of the reasons we did that, and not to disparage Western gaming or anything, but a lot of the motions in Western games are very broad, and Japanese people are a bit more sensitive to nuances and little details. And so we paid really close attention to details because that's what we find appealing about the characters, about the motions, and being able to express that, and just as a user being able to view that kind of detailed, nuanced motion. So when it comes to the character animations, there was a lot of time and effort put into them to make the characters feel alive. And looking at these animations, I really get that vibe that I'm actually watching people despite the colorful appearances and artistic design choice. Which, funnily enough, was also done intentionally by Shu Takumi, since again, they were working with the Nintendo DS and the characters couldn't be too complex. When designing characters, we emphasize their silhouettes and colors, so instead of remembering them by name, you'd think red hair or white coat, things like that. In fact, some characters weren't even given names. As the original was developed for the Nintendo DS, character design had to be as simple as possible. I bring this up to point out something important. You'll notice something about the design work of this game. How everything is done from a 2D perspective, as if you were watching a stage show. This isn't the only game that does this. One that comes to mind is Night in the Woods, where it uses a 2D side-scrolling perspective. Ghosttrick was probably one of the earlier games to use this camera angle outside of platformers, and frankly, it's a game that actually uses its camera for storytelling. I'll get more into that in a little bit, but... Looks like Lynn's dead again. Well, at least this time we'll actually talk to her and learn more about what our relationship is with her.
I don't think I can help you.
Why not?
'Cause I don't know you.
Ouch. Rejection. Well, we saved Lynn. She's still our only lead and...
I died again.
I thought you'd be a little more grave, under the circumstances.
Yeah, well, this is the third time after all. It's scary what a girl can get used to, don't you think?
Frankly, the way her mind works is a whole heck of a lot scarier to me.
Well, son of a bitch. Saving Lynn for the third time tonight and learning about this weird mechanism that killed her, we decide to team up with a detective, each party using each other in order to further their own goals, with our next goal going to a prison to check on an inmate's schedule. The culprit is someone who Lynn believes is innocent, so that's our next location, a prison, and we learned something intriguing.
Tonight I've lost a lot of my life, my memory, but there's a certain skill I've apparently lost too. I can't read!
Well, son of a bitch again. This might be a fruitless effort if we can't read. Still, gotta check. When we get to the prisoner's cell that we need to check, we see him painting. What is he painting? Well, thanks to the camera, we can't see. However, after we learn that his work schedule is blank, the prisoner moves his painting and... Hey, I know that handsome devil. This is one of the things I was talking about with ghosttrick playing around with its camera and angles, even feeling like we're on a stage play. Seeing something like this is easy for people to observe, since all we have to do is turn our heads. But the game uses its camera angle to hide big reveals like this. So we learn that the prisoner, just after saying, "I paint the faces I don't want to forget," and reveal this to be us, we learn we have a connection to this prisoner. Because that's us. I mean, who has that glorious hair, that expensive red suit, and those amazing sunglasses? This is why games are a fantastic medium for storytelling, and how even the limitations of your programming can be used for that. This is something that not a lot of games do, especially with games that have 3D graphics and details, because a reveal like this can easily be spoiled if you have control of the camera. Now, I'm not saying all games need to do this, and I'm sure that you can point to a lot of old point-and-click games that do similar things, but ghosttrick is one that really embraces this. And this isn't the only time that the camera is used to reveal something shocking. Speaking of shocking, immediately after this, we learn something more horrifying. However, my friends, this is where we need to end our review at the moment, because we're now getting deeper into spoiler territory. If what I've shown you up to now is enough to sell you on this game, then I ask that you stop watching this video right now and go play it. It's an amazing game, and while I do YouTube for a living, I, as a fan of it, cannot in good conscience spoil this game without warning you people any further, especially with what I'm about to show you. So, this is your final chance. If you don't mind being spoiled or just don't care, then let's get into the crazy spoilers for this amazing game. Just as we're leaving the prison, the police chief calls the guard station, and we just so happen to be possessing the phone. So we travel to the station, where we find a familiar white-coated detective talking about some camera footage taken at the junkyard. And it captured the moment of the murder. Our murder. This is it! This is our chance to see who killed us, and... As it turns out, the one who killed us was Lin. This entire time, we were saving and helping the one who took our life? The one who shot us? So either Lin has been lying to us this whole time, or there's something more going on in this town. After all, there's still the discrepancy of how our body got down to the lower level. In the initial timeline, the hitman kicked us down there, but since we crushed him under a wrecking ball, he couldn't have done it, so maybe... Well, shoot. That's one strong cat. In fact, I remember seeing that cat earlier. But before we can even think about this, we learn that Lin is at a location where she shouldn't be, and then... Well, what happened is Is that a giant chicken?
No, shh, he is legend.
Look at me! I'm dead! What took you so long?
Well, that's one way to greet a guy.
Now, obviously, since we learned who our killer is, we tell Lin it. We tell Lin, who unfortunately is shocked to learn that she's the one who pulled the trigger. We also learn that if a prisoner's schedule is blank, that means they aren't going to be doing anything, since they're going to be executed. I'm still being vague on this since I want you guys to play the game, but there's a moment that needs to be highlighted here.
Are you going to get revenge? That would be easy enough to do. All you have to do is not save me.
Is this the ending I was hoping for? Had I unraveled all the mysteries of me? What am I going to do now? I'm going to save you, that's what.
You are?
I want to know everything. Who I was, why I was killed. And I'd like to know who those guys are, too. I want answers. And I'm going to find them.
This is why I love Sissel as a protagonist. Yeah, he's a bit of a snarky character, but deep down he knows that something isn't right with this whole situation. Especially considering the blue people who keep showing up and have information on both Sissel and Lin. Then there's the man in the cell who painted a picture of us. Something isn't right, and if we just let Lin die, we're not going to get any answers, especially by a giant chicken. Sissel isn't impulsive to just believe that he has all the answers, and I like that in a protagonist. He could take the easy way out, but there's still something more going on in this town. So, time to save Lin in this puzzle, and we learned something fun, that if there's a dead body back when we go back in time, we can possess it and go back further in time. With every puzzle, we get new tools and tricks of the trade to save others. Like Lin, who comes back and...
No! Stay there! I'm at the crucial moment with this chicken here. I need you to pour me some water if it starts going down wrong.
Please don't tell me I need to save Lin from dying from chicken again. After Lin has her fill of chicken, we learn that the prisoner we had the schedule of is a former detective, Jowd. Years ago, he actually saved Lin from a hostage situation, and Jowd was her inspiration to become a detective, and she believes that he's innocent of his crimes. Even more interesting, we learn that the girl Camilla is actually Jowd's daughter, and that she should have been here at the chicken kitchen by now, along with the music box that was from the apartment. Unfortunately, a friendly detective tells Lin that Jowd's execution is tonight, and is even being moved up from the norm and happening soon. Very soon. So Lin asks us to save Detective Jowd and... Oops. Well, at least we know what to do with this one. Since Jowd died, we can now communicate with him, so small victories I suppose, but before we can actually question him, we need to get him out of prison. And this is where Ghost Trick's puzzle mechanics really shake things up. Instead of us going back in time, we now have to alert Zhao through a dark prison that has guards with night vision goggles. We have to do what we can to guide Zhao safely through the prison, and we're on a bit of a time crunch too, since the power will get back on. I'm bringing this up because honestly, I hated playing this section when the game first came out, since I thought Zhao was moving a bit slower than I would have liked, or I thought that the guards were a little too fast. Nowadays, I can appreciate the change in gameplay. It's a nice break from traveling back in time. However, even when we get Zhao out, Detective Cabanela is there to stop Zhao's escape. Still, since we got Zhao here, might as well ask him a question. How does he know us?
I'm very sorry, but I can't talk to you about that now.
What? Why not?
Because I don't know your true face.
How foreboding now, isn't it? This is what makes a mystery great, especially for a game. It makes plenty of twists and turns in the plot, and part of me doesn't want to keep going into the story since I don't want to spoil any more, even though I gave that spoiler warning already. But there's one more mechanic that I need to go over, and that unfortunately does have a bit of a spoiler to it. Later in the game, we need to find the music box. It has evidence in it that can prove Zhao's innocence, which was probably in the park, and as you can imagine, we come across another dead body, and well... Excuse me? I'm glad Camilla didn't get crushed, but I think we have something going on. We know for a fact that there are other ghosts out there. Ray in and of himself is a ghost, so it stands to reason that there would be other ghosts popping up in the world. But who is it? Who is this ghost who apparently has the ability to swap items around in midair?
What the? This person of much greater powers than me. It's you?
Hey, Cecil!
Oh my, it's...
Missile! Yes, folks, Shu Takumi made his dog into a ghost stronger than the main character of this story. With his tiny paws of justice, Missile is here to save the day! Gameplay-wise, when you have Missile's ghostly soul with you, you can swap between him and Sizzle. You can tell this by the green screen where Sizzle's is red. And while Missile can't have items do tricks, the little Pomeranian's abilities allow him to do much longer reach, and he can swap items that have the same shape. Again, this is playing with the 2D perspective. It's how we're able to swap the statue of Mino with a leaf, saving Camilla, and unfortunately killing someone in the process. Oh well, it was just a hippie, but I suppose we should bring him back nonetheless. I do greatly enjoy this nice addition to the gameplay. Not only because Missile is the best boy in gaming, but you can be the dog! It just sucks that Missile has to die to get these powers, but as we see from his flashback, we see a weird energy radiating from the ground. We've seen this graphic before. It was emanating out from our corpse. One thing about ghosttrick is that despite its simple visuals, whenever it uses its visuals, it makes sure they're unique, and if they share something like a shape or graphic, it's something that's important. Either as something that Missile can swap with, or something that's narratively important. And that's something that I love about this game and story. Granted, I'm leaving out a number of key details, since again, you guys should discover the fun things yourself. But I do gotta talk about the game portions, and this is technically a retrospective. So, final spoiler warning, folks. Night is long, but coming to an end. The sun will soon rise, and with it, will disappear. However, before we can do anything, we receive a call from Detective Cabanela, issuing a demand that Zhao's execution continue as planned. Otherwise, a hostage will be killed. When we get to the other side of the phone, we're met with a chilling sight.
Tonight, a man named Cecil met a detective named Lynn at a junkyard on the edge and then was killed by a bullet. But the scene I find waiting for me on the other end of the phone line feels like the final nail in the coffin of my lost memory. I see myself?
Yes, we find Detective Cabanela dead, and Cecil, the man in red, standing in front of his corpse, gun in hand. Who are we? We obviously can't be the man in red. After all, he's using his body. But something isn't right. After all, the man in red just walked out the door. As Detective Cabanela himself said, So, who are we? Gameplay-wise, we got a bit of a tough part here. You see, the man in red also has the powers of the dead, so if you do something that attracts his attention, he'll just reset you back.
Get away from me!
So in order to save the good detective, we need to do it discreetly. Luckily, we've got something else on our side. Another dead body! And saying that out loud, I hope my neighbors didn't hear that. Maybe we can go back even further in time like we did before and... well, son of a bitch. During this, we learn that the man in red, while having ghost powers, has different abilities from us. He can actually control people, and he's the one who manipulated Lynn into shooting, well, him, to blame her for a murder. There's not much we can do with our powers. There's a hatch under the old man, but it can't open. We can't attack the man in red. He's practically invincible and unaffected by the explosion as we saw. And the man in red still has the powers of the dead, so if he sees us doing anything, he'll just put a stop to our trick. And to throw more onto the mystery, apparently the man in red is a spirit from a decade ago. But Ray told us that we would disappear at sunrise. But that's a thought for another time. We've got lives to save. And luckily for our ghostly hero, we've got something that the man in red doesn't have. Missile!
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Yes, the best doggy in the world shows up in the nick of time, and with his powers of swap... Of course, we still have to go after the man in red, and luckily for us, we've got Lynn and the recently pardoned Detective Jowd on the case to find out where he is. As it turns out, the man in red was working with the blue people, and we managed to track them to a submarine? The Joanna. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The place where all this ends. The moment that we arrive, the phone is taken away. Jowd and Sissel's body are trapped in a room that was ejected into the sea. Lynn and Camilla are trapped in on the sinking submarine, and to make matters worse, water is still lifted up the vessel at a rapid pace. With a loyal dog Missile by our side, we try to do what we can to save the two young ladies, but unfortunately the door to another room isn't opening, and with Camilla on her back, Lynn doesn't look like she can get through the door. We try to open the door, but it's stuck until... well, that's not something you see every day. Inside the sealed room, we learn the truth. Deep in the dark bottom of the sea. If the glasses and the metallic hair shape didn't give it away, this is the man in red. This is Yomiel. 10 years ago, he was the man who took Lynn hostage. And on that same day, Yomiel died, struck in the back by a meteor shard, the Temsik. That meteor carried an unusual radiation with it. Anyone who dies while basked in it gains the powers of the dead. And the meteor itself stopped Yomiel's body from aging. In fact, his body was stuck in perpetual life and death. Any damage his body took would be instantly healed, cycling between life and death, and later on in this chapter we learn about Yomiel's past. I'm going to explain it here so I'm not jumping all over the place. We learn about Yomiel's past, how he was pulled in by a rookie Cabanela for interrogation. And Cabanela took it too far. He kept pushing Yomiel further and further to the brink of despair, and threatening jail time over him. The detective in white made a mistake though. He left his gun in the interrogation room. A scared Yomiel ran out of the police department, chased by Detective Jowd, who had pushed Yomiel into taking young Lynn as a hostage. To make matters worse, Yomiel did still die. He gained the powers of the dead, yes, but his body was legally declared dead. And unfortunately, before he had a chance to get back to his body, his fiancée took her life in grief. All the events tonight were orchestrated as a means of revenge on Yomiel's part. Have Jowd put to death for the murder of his wife, and frame Lynn for the murder of him. Granted, this was done in coordination with the blue people, who had different thoughts of how this would go down. They wanted to eliminate anyone who had a connection to the meteor, and that included Lynn. However...
I showed up.
Yomiel worked with these people to get a new start, but they stole the meteor shard from him and jettisoned his body into the ocean. There's no way out. This submarine is a coffin for ghosts. However,
There's something I don't understand. Why would they go to all the trouble of deattaching the control room?
that's a good question. If the blue men were just after the shard, they wouldn't need to fire off the room. So that means there's still a route. There's still a path to change things. Using a torpedo to get to the jettisoned room, Sissel, Missile, and Yomiel all made their way to find Zhao dead, and the big blue man standing over there in the darkness. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, the big blue guy's a robot.
Sure, fine. Whatever.
Just wanted to point out he's a robot and therefore he can be thrown away. Evil bastards. To make it clear, this is where we learn of Yomiel's past, sealed in eternal darkness. He existed in this world, no question about that, but nobody noticed him. What good were his powers? They didn't help anyone. Not even the passage of time could heal his pain. In fact, it only made it worse. Yomiel wanted to disappear. Ultimately, Ghosttrick is a story about death and what it can do to people. For Lin, she was willing to put herself in danger to save Jowd from his death. Jowd was willing to die for the crimes he caused, and Yomiel lashed out because his entire life was taken from him. I am not doing the story justice here, and that's why I'm leaving out quite a bit since it's a story that people should experience firsthand. And I'm glad it got remastered, so more people will have a chance to experience this amazing story. I'm gonna be completely honest, this is probably my favorite story in gaming. So we should probably continue where I left off. Since Jowd is here, we've got one last chance to go back in time. Any possibility, no matter how small, we can turn around. And when we do, we notice something odd in the body of Yomiel. He has a core. The aura is gone. In other parts where we see him controlling his body, his core wasn't available. It was because of the meteor fragment that was preventing his body from dying. But with it gone, Yomiel has a core of his own. And we can go back 4 minutes before his death, 10 years ago. Because of the Temsic fragment that was in his body, Yomiel's body was essentially kept in stasis since the day he died. Because of this, he is considered to have died that day every single day, never aging or changing. It's a huge loophole, but one that I really do love, and it's an exception, not the rule. Ghosttrick is also probably one of the only stories that I really enjoy with time travel in it. Not only is it a core mechanic to the game and storytelling, it also sticks to its rules. Sure, Yomiel's body was stuck in the perpetuation of the meteor, but that doesn't ultimately have anything to do with a time-traveling mechanic. We still just go back 4 minutes, no new rules, and the only reason why this works is because the main antagonist is already an outlier, so it makes sense how his body would be in a different location because, well, that's not where his body was. Time travel in media tends to be a bit too expansive, and it doesn't have enough rules, or the rules get contradicted by the story itself most of the time. In order to prevent massive plot holes and fridge questions, the mechanics of time travel and its effects must be clearly defined and always followed when used, and Ghosttrick does that. In any case, we finally make our way back 10 years ago, back to Temsic Park where Jowd is chasing after Yomiel, forcing the young man to grab Lin as a hostage. We also see a small black kitten come up to Jowd, and then... the meteor crashes and kills Yomiel with one of its shards. We're now tasked with preventing this death. However, Jowd is sure that if he killed Yomiel, even if the meteor doesn't kill the man in red. And Yomiel says this, "I'm fine with that." It's a deep line that I think proves that Yomiel isn't a bad person. He just fell into darkness and despair. After a little switcheroo using the giant stone mascot of Mino to deflect the meteor shard right through Jowd's leg, we managed to avert the situation. However, because the situation is still going on, Jowd has his gun trained on Yomiel, and then... Missile! Oh, you really are the best doggy in the world. And so we switch the bullet with... a sweet potato? At least Yomiel's not dead. Yay! Fate averted! Ah, son of a bitch. Now, sure, we could allow Lynn to be crushed and save her by going back 4 minutes before her death, and her death would be erased. But the memory of death would remain, even if Lynn is unconscious. It would remain on her, like a scar on her psyche. Plus, we learned that the unconscious can retain some semblance of their death in their memories. So we have to do something to save her. And that's when we get Yomiel with us. And it's at this point where we just sit back and enjoy the ride. We watch Sissel, Missile, and Yomiel work together, with Cecil using a water fountain to push a lamppost bulb into the air, Missile switching places with Mino, and finally Yomiel controlling his own body to throw Lynn to Jowd. And with that, we change the fate of not just Yomiel, but everyone involved in this story. This was the point where everything changed. But what about us? What about the main character? Who is he? Well... it looks like his fate was changed. Cecil's. These 10 long, lonely years, you are my one and only friend. How about it? Do you remember now, old friend? That's right. Do you remember, my friends? The game did indeed show us that we were a cat all along, using the 2D perspective to make us think that we were originally the man in red. Yomiel possessed our dead body, but we were right next to the meteorite and acquired our ghost powers when we were shot. And now, Cecil's back to being a cat, with a chunk of the Temsic meteor in his body. We've successfully changed the past, and the next 10 years are different for everyone. Seems like a great place to...
Wait!
Oh, right. Ray. I nearly forgot about you in all this.
Before you go back to a new present, I wanted to thank you.
You want to thank us? Well, as it turns out, there was another version of how tonight's events went down. One where we didn't help out. One where Lynn was killed by the hitman in the junkyard. One where Camilla and Missile were killed, with Missile dying right next to Yomiel. And in the process, the little fellow's powers of the dead were awakened. Yes, when Missile died, he was basking in the radiation of Yomiel's Temsic fragment. So as a ghost, Missile followed the man in red, even deep into the sea, and then he went back 10 years. He couldn't do anything with his powers and decided to wait for this fateful night. And as it turns out, Ray was Missile. Dang, man, you got shaggy! When that fateful night appeared again, Missile's powers had grown weak, and as such, he needed help. Someone who possessed the powers that Missile didn't. Even though Missile's powers changed, they were still weak. And he didn't have similar powers, like the power to go over telephone lines, but he knew someone who did. And after all, he met Cecil for the first time going around. And the cat said no to helping the good boy. And like that, Cecil disappeared through the telephone lines. So this old mutt decided to trick us, putting us on the path of the man in red and telling us that we would disappear by morning's rise. This dog tricked us! You thought you were ghost tricking, but it turns out you were ghost tricked.
Ooh, you suck!
And with this, these 10 years and this old dog will now disappear. And this would be the story that no one would really know, because we're going to a new present. I am refusing to show the epilogue for this game. It's something that should be reserved for you folks to enjoy through the game itself. Instead, I'm going to say this. Ghosttrick is an amazing game, but unfortunately it never really got the spotlight it deserves. Back when it released, the game didn't get a lot of promotion, its sales weren't all that great, and even Capcom admitted this. It didn't help that the game released at the end of Nintendo DS's life cycle and had been overshadowed by the 3DS coming out. So, 10 years later, I'm honestly surprised we've got a remaster for the game, and had become accessible for everyone to play it. Heck, Takumi himself stated that developing a Ghosttrick sequel would be difficult, and that he wouldn't want to continue Cecil's story since it was complete. But the powers of the dead? Well, that has a lot of potential for storytelling, especially since in the game we saw several shards of the Temsic meteor go about. So the potential of other people with the powers of the dead is out there. The producer of the game, Shingo Izumi, had this to say. Right now, we are dedicating all we have to deliver Ghosttrick Phantom Detective to as many players as possible, so we haven't had time to think about what we're going to do after that. I hope the amount of people who play this game is large enough that it makes us want to consider a sequel. So, I try to make it a point in these videos, I'm only giving my opinions on the games or shows or what I'm talking about in these. I try not to influence my audience on things unless I make it explicitly clear about it. Ghosttrick is one of the best games I have ever played. It has probably the best story of any video game I ever put my hands on, and I want you guys to go out and buy this game. I want you guys to go out and spread word about this game. I would love to see a Ghosttrick 2, even if it has nothing to do with Sissel and the rest of the cast. The game is a beautiful piece of history, and it deserves to be shared with the world. I think it's obvious that I love this game, and it's a game that I want to see expanded upon. And I know this is a long shot, and I highly doubt this would ever happen, but if Takumi or any other developers of the game see this video, I do have a personal message for you all. When this game first came out, I was going through a really hard time. I was struggling hard in life, and there was a void in it. I had enjoyed the Ace Attorney games, so when I saw this game on the shelf and learned that the creators of Ace Attorney were behind it, I figured I'd give it a shot. I wasn't expecting a story that would tug on my heartstrings. I wasn't expecting a game that would make me fall in love with its characters and world. In a way, Ghosttrick helped inspire me to become more creative. It made me want to pursue my own creative endeavors, and as such, Shu Takumi, I want to thank you and everyone who worked on this game from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Thank you for making this beautiful piece of art that has been with me for the last decade. Thank you for not forgetting about this great story and gem of a title. And thank you for giving me a piece of media that has legit gotten me through many hard times. I really appreciate it. And even if Ghosttrick 2 never happens, I'm just so glad to have this game in my life. So once again, thank you. And thank you for everyone who watched this video. This is probably going to be my most extensive video to date, especially when talking positively about something. A game that I truly love and admire. All I ask is that you like the video, leave a comment down below, and share it. Ghosttrick deserves to be seen by a lot more people. I'm just one voice, but I hope my voice can reach so many other people. It's a story that should be shared, and that's ultimately the goal of this video. I'm MangaKamen, and have a great night, everyone. Because you never know, you could disappear before the next sunrise yourself.